I'm a hotel receptionist in Barcelona, and last month, this American couple checked in around midnight. She's limping badly. He's carrying her bag. 20 minutes later, he's back at my desk, asking where the nearest hospital is. His wife twisted her ankle on those cobblestones near the cathedral. I gave him directions to Hospital Del Mar, told him it's about 15 minutes by taxi. He nodded, then asked if I knew how much this would cost without travel insurance. I told him maybe €100, probably less if they just wrap it and send her home. He stared at me like I'd told him the moon was made of cheese. €100? For an emergency room? I explained that's roughly what they'd charge a tourist for x-rays and treatment. He pulled out his phone and started searching for private clinics. Convinced I'd misunderstood his question. No, like the actual bill. The real cost. I repeated the same number. His wife called from upstairs asking what was taking so long. He looked at his phone, looked at me, then said in Dallas, "Just walking through those doors costs us $1,200 before anyone even looks at you." They went to the hospital. She came back 2 hours later with a wrapped ankle, crutches, and a receipt for €83. He kept the receipt like it was a museum artifact, took a photo of it, texted it to someone. The next morning at breakfast, he told me that back home this exact injury cost them $4,000 last year when their daughter had the same fall. Insurance covered half. His voice was so flat when he said it, like he was reporting the weather. I've worked this desk 7 years, seen hundreds of American tourists panic over medical situations. They'll hobble around on broken toes, ignore chest pains, dose themselves with pharmacy medicine for infections that need antibiotics. Last summer, a woman asked me if there were payment plans for stitches. Stitches. She'd cut her hand pretty badly on a broken glass at the beach bar. I told her the emergency visit would probably cost less than her hotel room for the night. She didn't believe me until after she went, came back with 4 stitches and a bill for €62. She cried in the lobby. Not from pain, from relief. What's strange is how they talk about it. They'll mention the cost like it's weather, something that happens to you that you can't control. Medical bills aren't a political issue to them, they're just life. The same way someone from Norway might mention their winters are dark. I had one guy tell me his family pays $900 a month for health insurance that doesn't actually cover anything until they've spent $6,000 first. Then he ordered a €100 seafood platter and didn't blink at the price. The math makes no sense. I'm a pharmacist in Rotterdam. And last week, this American grad student came in looking panicked, with a prescription for antibiotics. Ear infection? Pretty standard stuff. I told him it'll be about €8. He looked at the paper, looked at me, then asked if that's what his insurance company would get billed eventually. I explained that no, €8 is what he pays right now, total cost. He counted out exact change like he was buying the last bottle of water in a desert, kept asking if I was sure that's all. Before he left, he mentioned that this exact prescription cost him $180 in Michigan last year. His insurance covered $40. I asked why he didn't just pay the $180 if his insurance wasn't covering much anyway. He said because then it doesn't count toward my deductible. I still don't understand what that means. My brother works the intake desk at a private clinic in Mumbai, and he told me about this American businessman who came in for a routine checkup last month. Blood work, EKG, basic physical exam. The bill came to 14,000 rupees, about $160. The guy studied the invoice for 5 full minutes, then asked if they'd forgotten to add the facility fees. My brother explained that, no, this is the complete cost for everything, including the doctor's time and lab processing. The American kept insisting there must be other charges coming later, maybe a separate bill from the lab or the cardiologist. He'd experienced this before at home, where one visit generates 4 different bills from 4 different companies over the next 2 months. My brother had to walk him through each line item twice before he'd accept that this was actually the total. Later, the same guy mentioned his last physical in Houston cost him $1,100 after insurance. He said it like he was ordering coffee, completely casual about throwing away money that could feed a family here for months. I manage a medical center in Berlin, and we get a lot of international patients through corporate partnerships. Last fall, this American tech worker came in, absolutely convinced we'd made an error on his bill for outpatient surgery. The procedure was for a minor hernia repair, took about 90 minutes, included the surgeon's fee, anesthesia, facility costs, and follow-up appointment. Total cost was 1,800 euros. He'd already paid it, but he showed up at my office 2 days later with the receipt, asking when the real bill would arrive. I told him that was the real bill, completely finalized. He pulled out his phone and showed me his brother's hospital bill from the same. Surgery in California, $43,000 before insurance adjustments. After insurance, it was still $12,000 out of pocket. He tried explaining that maybe our hospital hadn't coded the surgery correctly. That's why it was so low. As if we'd accidentally given him the wrong price, like a cashier at a grocery store. His assumption was that expensive healthcare was normal healthcare, and anything cheaper must be illegitimate. He asked if German surgeons were properly trained. I work in medical billing at a hospital in Prague, and we occasionally see American medical tourists who've come specifically for procedures they can't afford at home. Last month, we had this woman in for a hip replacement. Complete surgery, 5 days in hospital, physical therapy, medications. Follow-up visits, the entire package cost her 9,000 euros. She paid in installments over 3 months, kept thanking us for being so flexible with the payment plan. Then she mentioned casually that the same surgery was quoted at $78,000 in Arizona. Her insurance would cover some of it, but her portion would still be around $25,000 after deductibles and co-insurance. She'd done the math and realized she could fly to Prague, pay for the surgery, stay in a nice hotel for a month during recovery, and still spend less than her Arizona deductible. She brought her husband and turned it into a vacation. The insane part is she acted like this was a clever life hack, not a complete failure of her country's system. She's a nurse back home. My sister drives an ambulance in Stockholm. She told me about this American exchange student who had a seizure at a university lecture hall last year. First responders arrived within 6 minutes, stabilized her, transported her to Karolinska Hospital. In the ambulance, she kept asking how much this ride would cost, even though she was barely conscious. My sister kept telling her to stay calm, focus on breathing, don't worry about costs right now. The student grabbed my sister's sleeve and said, "No, you don't understand. I need to know if I can afford this before we get there." She was literally semi-conscious, and her main concern was whether the ambulance bill would bankrupt her. My sister later found out the student's insurance from her American university didn't cover ambulance transport. And back home, a single ambulance ride in her hometown had cost her family $3,000 the previous year. The Stockholm bill was 400 kronor, about 36 euros. The student called her parents crying, not from the medical scare, but because she'd been terrified she'd just destroyed her finances. I worked admissions at a public hospital in Lisbon. And last summer, we had this American tourist come in with chest pains around 2 in the morning. Classic heart attack. Symptoms: left arm numbness, pressure in his chest, shortness of breath. We got him triaged immediately, did an EKG blood tests, kept him under observation for 8 hours. Turned out to be a severe anxiety attack, not cardiac. But we ran every necessary test to rule out the dangerous possibilities. When he was discharged and came to my window for the bill, I told him it would be 130 euros for the emergency visit. He asked me to repeat the number 3 times. Then he started arguing with me, saying I must mean 1,300, that 130 couldn't possibly cover all those tests and the overnight monitoring. I showed him the itemized statement. He sat down in the waiting area and called his wife back in Ohio, and I heard him say, "Honey, remember when I went to the ER last year for that kidney stone? This cost less than our copay was for that visit." His voice cracked on the last part. My cousin works at a dental clinic in Budapest. And last month, they had this American couple come in for emergency dental work. The husband had a severe abscess that needed root canal therapy and a crown. The wife kept asking for cost estimates before they'd agree to anything. Wanted everything in writing, asked about payment plans. Total cost for everything, including emergency visit, x-rays, the root canal procedure, temporary crown, permanent crown 2 weeks later, and all follow-up care was 640 euros. They paid it, but the wife told my cousin that back in Tennessee, they'd gotten a quote for the same procedure at $4,800. Their dental insurance would cover half. That's why they'd waited 3 months hoping it would improve on its own, which made the infection worse and required more extensive treatment. The husband had been in pain for 90 days because spending $2,400 would have meant skipping their mortgage payment. My cousin asked why they didn't just save up for a few months to afford it. The wife explained they were already saving for their daughter's braces, which insurance doesn't cover at all, estimated at $7,000. I work at a walk-in clinic in Dublin, and we get a steady stream of American tourists during summer months. Last August, this family came in because their 10-year-old had a nasty cut on his foot from stepping on glass at the beach. Needed cleaning, antibiotics, and 5 stitches. Standard procedure, took about 40 minutes total. The mother kept asking if we were sure we didn't need to run any additional tests, kept insisting there might be glass still in the wound that required imaging. We assured her the doctor had examined it thoroughly and found no foreign objects. She pushed back, saying, "But shouldn't we do an X-ray just to be absolutely certain? What if there's a tiny piece we can't see?" The doctor finally understood she wasn't being paranoid about her son's health. She was trying to justify the cost in her head by making sure they got their money's worth. She'd been conditioned to expect medical visits to be expensive, so a simple treatment felt incomplete. The total bill was €95. She looked at it and asked if this covered the antibiotics too. We explained that no, she'd need to fill that prescription at a pharmacy separately for about €12. She actually seemed relieved that there was an additional charge. Like the low price had been making her suspicious of the quality of care. Her son was fine. The cut healed normally. But she'd been prepared to insist on unnecessary medical imaging just to feel like the visit was worth the cost. I'm a hospital administrator in Montreal. We participate in a program that helps Americans access insulin at reasonable prices. Last year, we had this man drive up from Vermont regularly to pick up his diabetic supplies because he couldn't afford them at home. His monthly insulin in the States was costing him $470 even with insurance. Same insulin here cost him $80 about $60. He'd made the calculation that driving 4 hours each way, once a month, and taking a day off work was still cheaper than paying American pharmacy prices. He wasn't alone. We'd see small groups of Americans making pharmacy runs together, carpooling to split gas costs. They'd talk about it like it was completely normal. Like they were just driving to a different grocery store for better prices on milk. One woman told me she'd been doing this drive for 3 years. 3 years of international pharmacy runs because her own country had decided affordable insulin was optional. When I mentioned how absurd that seemed, she just shrugged and said at least Vermont is close to the border. People in Texas have it worse. My sister works at a pharmacy in Auckland. And last month, this American couple came in to fill prescriptions for the husband's blood, pressure medication, and the wife's thyroid medication. Both are extremely common, basic medications that millions of people take daily. The total cost was $32 New Zealand dollars for a month's supply of both medications. The husband counted the pills twice to make sure they'd received the full amount. Then he told my sister that these exact medications cost them $360 per month back in Florida. Their insurance covered it partially, but their co-pay still added up to $140 monthly. They'd been in New Zealand for 2 weeks on vacation and decided to refill early just because it was so much cheaper. My sister asked why they didn't just order a larger supply while they were here. The husband explained that U.S. Customs limits how much medication you can bring back. And also his American doctor would need to keep writing prescriptions anyway for insurance purposes. So he couldn't just stop using the U.S. system entirely. They were trapped in it. He mentioned they'd considered moving to New Zealand permanently, but their ages made immigration difficult. He said it's so matter-of-factly considering international relocation. It's just to afford blood pressure pills. I run a medical supply store in Manila, and we get occasional American expats who've retired here partially because of healthcare costs. Last year, this former teacher came in needing supplies for his CPAP machine. The supplies mask, filters, tubing, everything he needed for 3 months cost him 4,200 pesos, roughly $75. He told me the identical supplies cost him $350 back in Oregon every 3 months. His Medicare covered some of it, but not all, and he'd be spending over $1,000 yearly on supplies alone. Here in Manila, he could get the same equipment, see his doctor regularly, get his prescriptions filled, and his total annual healthcare costs, including a private insurance supplement, were less than he'd been spending just on CPAP supplies in America. He'd done the full calculation, even paying for flights back to visit his kids twice a year. He was saving $18,000 annually by living here. He showed me a spreadsheet. He's a former math teacher, so he'd worked out every detail. The numbers were grotesque. A retired public school teacher had to leave his own country to afford basic medical supplies for a common sleep disorder. I work in hospital administration in Warsaw, and we occasionally see Americans who've moved here specifically for healthcare access. Last fall, this woman in her 40s came in for treatment planning for her rheumatoid arthritis. The medication she needed, a common biologic, cost her $8,000 per month in Texas before insurance. After insurance, she was still paying $2,200 monthly because she hadn't hit her out-of-pocket maximum yet. That's over $26,000 per year just for one medication. In Poland, the same medication through our national health system with supplemental private insurance cost her €300 monthly, about $330. She'd moved to Warsaw, found remote work, learned basic Polish, completely relocated her life to afford her medication. She'd been here 8 months and said the quality of care was identical, same drug, same monitoring, same results. She'd tried every assistance program in America, every manufacturer coupon, every insurance option her employer offered. Nothing brought the price down enough. So she left. She told me she'd calculated that even if she never made another dollar in her life, the money she'd saved on medication in 8 months had already paid for the move. I'm a medical interpreter in Copenhagen, and I work with a lot of international patients who come through our hospital system. Last week, I was helping an American woman navigate a follow-up appointment after a minor surgical procedure. As we were leaving, she stopped at the payment desk out of habit, even though everything had already been handled through her visitor's health coverage. The clerk smiled and told her there was nothing more to pay. The woman stood there for a moment, then said something I've heard variations of dozens of times from American patients. You know what the worst part is? I'll go home next week and everything goes back to normal. I'll tell people about this and they'll think I'm exaggerating. Or they'll say European healthcare is inferior because it's cheaper. Or they'll say we have the best system in the world and I just got lucky here. And I'll go back to paying $500 a month for insurance that doesn't cover anything until I've spent $6,000 first. And I'll just accept it because everyone else does. She wasn't angry when she said it. She was exhausted. That's what I keep noticing. Not outrage, but this deep, tired acceptance that this is just how it is for them. They've been convinced that the most expensive healthcare in the world is the price of freedom, and anything less is somehow inferior. I wanted to tell her it doesn't have to be this way, but she already knew that. She'd just experienced it. The tragedy is she'll go home anyway and nothing will change.